All right. All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. So super exciting. We are going to get into something I think a lot of my clients are very interested in. I get a ton of calls about this. So super excited to have this special edition, this masterclass around ground up construction. So as you guys are jumping online, if you're over on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, do us a favor in the comments, go ahead and say hello, and let us know that you're here. And you guys can put some questions if you have questions as we're going through the info. Go ahead and put in the comment screen. They should pop through, and we'll also go over and monitor. And that way, Christine can answer any specific questions, and then also we can definitely get you any follow-up stuff that might be needed. So if this is your first time to me learning about myself, my name is Paige Hernandez. I'm a mortgage broker out of California, specializing in investor-centric financing. So we do a lot of debt service over here, and we do a lot of fix and flip, and even some ground up. And that's how I met Christine through Builders Capital. She has a wealth of knowledge. She's like your expert when it comes to being a real estate investor. She's done pretty much every real estate investing type project. So she will be able to run us through the ground up process. How do you get started? What are those things that you need to be aware of? All of the zoning stuff. And then we will get into a Q&A. So Christine, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So why don't we start, and why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we will go ahead and kick off the info.
So, I actually started out managing projects for investors, just really from the project management standpoint and working with the contractors and so forth. And then the fund that I was working with, they really had a hard time finding a real estate agent to work with them on things. So that got me to get my real estate license. And then one thing led to another. I partnered up with some people and we started fixing flipping houses. We've done some fixer uppers and put them into rentals, and we've developed townhouses. Haven't done condos yet, but I've financed condos. And I've done some personal spec building as well. And then just with doing all of that, I love sharing all of my knowledge and helping other investors, especially newer investors, and connecting people. So I actually joined forces with Builders Capital to be able to work with brokers, investors, and everybody along the line. So I love what I do. I get to talk to a lot of people, help a lot of people, and I like to see people succeed.
Yeah, I have a ton of clients that are really, I get a ton of calls about ground up.
Yeah.
So also when we go through the information, there is a difference between I want to do ground up for my own personal
Mhm.
thing because that profit margin's different than I am building a value add type project. Those
Those are
are
the ones.
different ways that we finance them. So why don't you go ahead and kick off your master class with us today? And then you guys, if you have questions, throw them in the box.
Okay, so obviously you have to have the land to be able to build anything on. So we can talk a little bit about that. A lot of people think that you can just buy a piece of property and put whatever you want, on the property. And depending where you live, the biggest thing is to really understand what your zoning restrictions are. Look at the future land use. Make sure if it's in any historic district, you're not going to run into any hiccups or anything. I've had so many people that like I'm in the Tampa Bay area, and in St. Petersburg, they recently rezoned a lot of the busier corridors, and they've increased the density. Well, there's a really small pocket, and it's not just a big square area. It's a couple different areas that are in the historic district, and they will absolutely not let you demolish a structure unless it's deemed unsalvageable, and it will be nearly impossible to be able to do that. had an investor call me and we talked about, he wanted to put townhomes on it. He was under contract and in the due diligence phase. The seller told him that they already had approval to be able to demo the house. And I said, I'm telling you, you can't. You need to hear it from the horse's mouth. Do your due diligence. Don't go by hearsay or whatever. And sure enough, they said, nope, you're not going to be able to demo it. Here's what you need. And we got him out of that contract. But yeah, you really have to understand the zoning. And, a lot of people, when they're going under contract, it's one thing if you want to buy a single, family home for yourself. There's loans that you can do, construction perm loans, have the builder do it. Builder needs to be qualified. And then there's everything that you and I do. And that is a completely different animal. You need to really ideally have the funds to be able to get it zoned, get it entitled where, say you want to put 8 townhouses on there. And you might already have the zoning in place for it, but you have to get it entitled and you have to, have it ready to go and permit ready to go. So, it's not something that you can go into without any liquidity or funds, and people can give you numbers all over, and it really just depends on where in the country you're building. So there's a lot that goes into just understanding that acquisition. Once you get through zoning and hey, this is what we can do, you've talked to the zoning department. Then you've got to do, depending on the area, you have to do soil testing, ground testing. You need to get with your engineers, your architects. You need a site plan. You have to make sure, depending on the area, you've got the proper drainage. If you can hook up to utilities, there's certain areas where you have to put septic systems in. And by the time you start digging, Georgia's one of those areas, you can run into some hiccups and next thing you know, you're having to spend another $80,000. So there's just a lot of planning that you really need to do. And whoever you are hiring as your team, you need to make sure they're competent. Do your research, make sure they don't have any lawsuits in the past or any complaints against them. And it's there's a lot that goes into it. But once you get over all of that, and you get through the infrastructure and everything that you need, a lot of people get with some architects and they just throw floor plans together on what would probably work there. And for resale purposes, if it's not a good floor plan and it's not functional, that's going to affect you being able to sell. And that's time value money. I mean, if you've got to leave a property sitting on the market for 3 months, you're paying money on that loan. So,
Let me ask you a question.
yeah,
I know it's going to be dependent upon where in the country this is. But what should somebody plan on for, like, you buy the land and then you have to go through this whole process, right, of getting it ready to build. You got to go through the entitlement process and all of that and getting your um, plans approved and permits and all that kind of stuff. How long?
I mean, it can take up to a year. I
Okay.
mean, depending on the zoning, if you've got to go through hearings and everything else. We were looking at a property in Melbourne Beach 2 years ago, and it was there were some really crazy zoning things that went on. They had decreased the density over in that area, and this specific property had 2 condos on each side. One of them was a multi-building complex. The other one was a smaller condo complex. And in those zoning hearings, it might take 2-3 months to have an attorney work with you and an engineer on prepping everything, and then you have a meeting, and then you may not have another meeting for 2 or 3 months. So I mean, I would absolutely give yourself at least a 6-month minimum. Some states you can get permits, once you get all that approved, you can get permits in less than a month. I can tell you that that's not going to happen in our area. So it
Yeah.
really just depends. But I mean, you need to give yourself at least, 6 months, to do the proper due diligence and planning, and maybe even a year. It really, really just depends.
Okay.
And it depends if you have to get it rezoned, if you have the locals coming out with their pitchforks, because that will
Right.
happen.
They don't like that. All right, let's keep going.
Um, so a lot of people forget little things in their budget. Um, there's the architecture fee. There are, if you're doing multiple properties, you might need an HOA in your townhomes. An attorney has to, write up those docs and so forth. So there's just a lot of like little things that people forget in their budget. There's working capital. A lot of the times when we fund things, we're not just going to give you money and then you're going to go do it. You're going to have working capital. And so that's a very big thing that, like you order trusses for something. I mean, depending, that could be 30,000, 100,000, 200,000, depending on the size of the project. Well, those trust companies, a lot of them are going to want half of that money as a deposit. What we have a program through Builders Capital that we work with our brokers as well as our builders, where we can sometimes pass on discounts and it helps with that working capital. But people forget about a lot of those things in the budget. It's important to understand what the lender will fund. You're still going to have costs that the lender may not fund. Anything pertaining to the project itself, typically you're going to have in your scope of work budget, which could include HOA docs, construction documents, stuff like that. But some banks and some lenders are very picky about what they will fund. So you really need to have that understanding as well. And I mean, I've seen people run out of money. I've seen people, oh yeah, we can get it done for $150 a square foot. And that's just the vertical material costs. They don't realize that they're probably spending $10,000 on, extra foundation support if there's a basement or whatever it might be. So, really get with whoever your contractor is. And I tell people, if you're starting out, you want to get with multiple people. If you can partner with somebody that has the experience, the proven track record, and those builders in some states, you can look up the permit history on projects. Ask these builders that are going to do work for you, say, hey, I need a list of, if you're going to build 4 townhouses, I want to know that you've built townhomes. What townhomes have you built? Go look it up in the property records. Not every state is easy, but look it up, make the phone call, make sure that, there weren't any issues or, stop work orders that, they were doing stuff before they should have been doing. Because it happens. I mean, it really, really happens.
That's real interesting. Yeah. In your due diligence process, as you're interviewing your vendors, yeah, I never thought to look at stop work orders. Like that's important because that happens and it's like, oh
It
no.
does.
Yeah.
It happened to us. I mean, it happened to us. We had somebody that, you know, they started doing some stuff and they were like, oh yeah, permit's ready, no problem. And they there was a backspace that needed to be rebuilt. I mean, it was in the square footage. It was just the previous people had, it was press board. I mean, it was literally press board on the outside. And he just started building it. And the inspectors come around,
Yeah.
and he didn't have the permit for that part. So, and we had never gotten one. I definitely pride myself on pulling all the right permits and doing everything and not cutting those corners. And yeah, it happens.
Especially with a ground up, like I know some of you, my fix and flip clients, you may not be pulling permits on everything.
Yeah,
I got you. Depending on what it is, but if you're going to be doing ground up, I would assume you probably need 100% permitted everything.
yeah, you do. But I've had them where they've submitted everything except for like the notice of commencement for the demo of the
Mhm.
property. And they demoed the house and they've got the new construction permits going at the same time. And then you've got to stop work order because they never approved the permit and you
Yeah,
already demoed it.
yeah.
Just little things like that,
Oops.
you don't think of. And it's as much as you want to be able to trust other people, you really have to kind of babysit things and really understand where you are in the process and timelines and so forth.
Yeah, let me ask you another question. Um, I know this is gonna, and you can tell me like too wide of a question. So, and I know it's gonna be market specific, but where are you seeing approximate like square foot cost to build right now?
I mean, and we're talking just vertical, right? We're not
Yeah.
talking all the other stuff. You know, probably I would, and I know this is a big range, but I mean, you're going to be between 150 and $200 a square foot is
Okay.
probably what you're going to be. It just depends area, finishes, I
Mhm.
mean, the type of project that, you're working on.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all going to play into it. If
Okay.
you're going to be building something that you're going to sell for $1 million a piece,
Yeah, that's another
on
animal.
the market, you're gonna have to, put some nice finishes in there. But yeah, I mean
Okay.
that's fair.
Yeah. I actually have a client who she's done a handful of like ground up, so now she has the ability to self-manage. Not being a GC, but still, now she
Yeah,
can self-manage. But she hires whatever local area she's in, she will hire somebody local specific to like a project manager
yep,
because she's like that person is worth their weight in gold because they already have the connections at the city. They're already talking to them. They know the timeline like that. She's like, I would pour my money into there because you're saving, if you can self-manage it, you're going to save on like GC rates because you can sub it out. But like having that project manager in place, she said, is like
it
worth
makes a
it.
big difference. Especially when you can only do so much as yourself, right?
Yeah.
I had a GC, and I said, hey, I need to know when the tile's done. I've got two different paint samples that we're bringing over, and this is on a very small scale, but just a little bit of an example, where sometimes they just do stuff and don't tell you. And they were like, oh, well, we were ready to paint. I was like, well, you didn't give anybody a schedule, and they just picked a paint color and painted. Fortunately, it was okay. And they were
Hopefully it's
like,
the right
oh,
color,
yeah, you can use that on another project. I'm like, a medical office.
right? Yeah, no, no, I showed up, my brother and I have done projects together. I remember, I hope he doesn't watch this. The last one we did together, I was like, "Listen, we're not painting anything gray. Please ditch the gray." And then I showed up and I was like, "What?
What's that gray? What's
The
that gray?
house is gray, the front of the house is
What?
all gray,
No,
the
it's
inside
gray.
was." Alright, I'm glad everything that I prepped as far as design, nothing was looked at. Sounds awesome.
Mhm. Yep,
Good
yep,
stuff,
yep, yep.
good stuff.
Yeah, and another thing that a lot of times, people forget to do is, and it really depends on the property, is they forget to stage it.
Mhm.
They forget that they need to include stuff like that in their budget.
Yeah,
And it makes a big difference. I mean, it
yeah,
really makes a big difference. I mean, that's why when people do, master plan communities, they have a model home. I
yeah,
mean, people walk into that model home, they're like, oh, it's so beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they forget to stage it. And there's all those extra little details that help move the property and just be more efficient.
Mhm,
Big
mhm.
difference.
Alright, let's go back to our master class. Where did we leave off?
I am pulling it back up. I'm working on two computers here. Let's see. Financing's a big one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead. I
yeah.
muted myself.
And we one of the things that we always look at on our end is experience. And if you come to us and say, hey, I want to build a 5-story condo unit, and you've never done condos before, it's going to be hard to get a lender to, whether it's private equity or not, to underwrite that deal. Sometimes we can get the GC on file if they have the experience to sign, a little bit of a guarantee, but you're going to get pushback on that too. So, I definitely tell people starting out, if you can find somebody to partner with and just kind of get those few under your belt, and then slowly grow, a lot of the things will run a lot smoother. And we get so many people, brokers that come to us and, oh, they want zero cash to close. That's what I get a lot lately. We don't want any cash to close. They already put money into the project. Well, how much money have they put into the project? Well, they bought it for, $500,000. Okay. What else have they put into it? And they may have thrown a permit on there. They may not have to entitle it. It might just be a single family house. But they bought it for 500,000 and they want, zero cash in. Well, I mean, we're looking at, there's loan to cost, there's loan to value and so forth. So a lot of people, I think, have delusions of grandeur that they can do these projects without having money, or they take these online courses that say, oh yeah, you can become an investor and you don't have to have any money to do it. And we're not gonna, we'll personally at Builders Capital, if you've got somebody that will, lend you some debt that's sub to us, we'll let you do it. But a lot of people have that misconception that you can get 100% financing and no problems with no skin in the game.
Yeah. What was I looking at the other day? My brain's like, what were we looking at? Everything. But yeah, I was like, oh, I know what it was. I know. So I was brought on to be an expert witness for a court case that deals with hard money. And there was like a seller carry on it. And I'm like looking at the contract and I'm like, who read this contract on any side and thought this is going to be like, I could just look at it and I'm like, this is a like 100,000, $100 was the deposit for a 1 point whatever purchase. And the seller was carrying back 50 and the loan was 50. And I'm like, there, you have $100 into the transaction. Like, who thought that this was okay? Like, just from
Yeah,
a risk
exactly.
analysis, like,
Yeah,
no, I need you to have skin in the game. It's too easy for you to walk, right? You have nothing to lose. And
yeah.
so, yeah, no.
Yep, I see it all the time, I mean, all the time. And I know it's hard to find land or properties to flip anymore. I mean, it's become this very popular culture, oh, I'm a real estate investor. I want to, and people think that they can make millions doing it and they're going to retire in 5 years. And, the reality of it is, when you are flipping houses and doing ground up construction and, there's times where your bank account might be nice and fat and then other times where it's depleted. Um, and you have to have skin in the game. But I can't tell you some of the contracts that I see because you're getting them, off market. And when you're looking at these contracts, the attorneys aren't reviewing them and writing them up. And we get them sometimes on like a purchase, and I look at it and I'm like, the dates are not right. It's not even a valid contract. So yeah, there's just so many little things that go into it. I mean, to really, really pay attention to.
Yeah, some of the contracts, if they're not done, if they're like off market between two parties, some of the stuff that comes in, I'm like, what? Did you just take a lined like piece of paper and wrote like I will sell my house to so and so for I
Yeah,
mean it's pretty much the most like I'm like where did you get this template? Like this is crazy. I
yeah,
don't know.
no
I'm just
closing
like
date on there. There's like no closing date. It's like,
yeah.
okay.
So if somebody wants to like okay, I've done maybe some fix and flips. I want to get into ground up. Okay, so most likely I have to find a partner that has ground up experience or a contractor that has ground up experience. Now, what
Mhm.
are some things that they need to know as far as, okay, so let's go over like loan to cost, what that calculation is, what are the, numbers that they should, in familiar terms that they should be aware of?
So typically your loan to cost on average is going to be, 85%. And you really have to think about what you're financing into the loan amount. Like we let you finance the origination fee. So if you have a luxury product that you're building, that origination fee is a lot of money. So it's not just, oh, the loan amount, I need to build it is, $1.2 million. Well, it's probably going to be a lot higher than that. And some of those fees in there are not just building cost fees. And then our loan to values, those vary. We're at 65%. Some lenders are a little bit higher, but they might charge more points. Or the interest rate might be higher. So there's just so many moving parts that you really need to pay attention to. And some people get stuck on points, and then other people get stuck on interest rate, and then they want both. And you're not going to get both. You know what I mean? You're absolutely not going to get both.
Yeah. Pick your poison,
Yep,
everybody. So if
yep,
you're like this and you're like, what the heck is loan to cost? So loan to cost is going to be, I mean, think of like how much it's going to cost you and then
yep,
the loan against it. So you have your acquisition plus your rehab or your
mhm, yeah,
budget.
yep,
Yeah. And then, you're going to be 85 with builders. And then when she's like, our LTV, that's on your after repair value, that ARV, then
yep.
you can't go above 65. So you got to run both calculations and make sure that it fits on both sides.
It does,
Um,
and
yeah,
I see it a lot where our loan to value, so like the as built value, so to say, or if you're doing a fix and flip, the as repaired value,
yeah,
we'll see it where, that might be at 65% and your loan to cost might be at like 72, but we can't really push that loan to cost higher because then that
because you're
pushes our
limited on that
value,
65.
so it's usually not both of those. It's
Yeah,
kind of in the middle. Like you have to massage it a little bit. And it's definitely, we get a lot of times where people are like, oh yeah, the market's going up, and by the time we're done being built, we're going to be able to build it and get more money for it. And
maybe.
typically that's what happens. Not all the time, but and sometimes as you're building it, your costs go up. There's things that
Mhm.
come up no matter
Yep.
what. um
COVID,
Always build
COVID.
a contingency in there no matter what, and I keep a good solid 10% contingency no
Yeah,
matter whether it's you're flipping a house or doing ground up construction. You always want that contingency in there on the total budget, just in case you're covered. And then at the end of the day, it's just gravy to your net profit.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that'd be nice. I think I'd blow every budget anyways. So,
Yeah. You don't even, it's so funny. People are like, oh,
I don't know if I've ever come in under budget.
home. I don't even want to tell you what we spent on our backyard that we will never get in return. But I'm like, you know what? I'm living here and I'm enjoying it. And I'm very well aware that, I probably put in way too much
Hmm.
in my
Yeah.
backyard. But when you're building something for resale versus building something to keep, um,
Hmm.
you have to be mindful of finishes.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times people are like, oh, but it's an exotic, quartzite stone, and like
Yep.
you're not going to get that value. I mean,
Mhm.
you're just not.
That's a custom build for one person.
Yeah,
Like, it's not, yeah. Yeah, no, I have a problem. And then also, if you guys are, we're gonna do an appraisal class in like, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, talking about reconsideration of value because I have some investors sometimes, they have like an idea of what that ARV is, but it'll be like, well, there's no comps. And if there's no comps, I can't get that on an appraisal. Like, I don't care what you think the value is. If I can't get it on an appraisal, that's going to be a problem on financing
yeah,
or making certain decisions as far as bed bath counts. And so, like, where's your money best spent? And where are those value adds? And you don't want to overbuild for the area because you need to make sure if you're going to keep it, that's a different conversation. But if you're going to sell it or you're going to try to refinance it, like, we have to get value or we're
yes.
kind of stuck.
Hmm.
Let's explain Dutch, non-Dutch, because these are sometimes people are like, I don't know what that means. As far as interest. So non-Dutch is like when you're going to pay only money on the money that you draw down
Mhm.
versus sometimes I haven't worked with anybody, I think recently, that does a Dutch interest where you just pay no matter what.
Yeah, we prefer all the interest reserves to be collected at closing, so you don't have to
Okay.
worry about it.
Yeah.
But you're only paying interest on what you draw for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So toward the end of that build process, you're definitely heavier in, your interest payments or whatever it might be. And some people try to front load their budget too.
I front
They
loaded my budget.
I do. I mean, it's definitely what I do.
Yeah.
Now the underwriters are going to know. They're going to be like, you front load a little bit too much, but sometimes they do that. But yeah, it's so you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, most of the people I know now, it's on what you draw. Unless you're working with like a warehouse line or stuff like that, and you've got to think about that too.
Yeah.
But now you're talking more production builders, and it's
That's a different animal. Yeah.
different.
What else do they need to know?
And if they want to look at values themselves, it's always good to get with a real estate agent, but it's always good to double check what they're doing. Um,
Uh-huh.
and if you can find something as close as possible square footage wise, as like for like as possible. I meet every single appraiser I possibly can at my properties.
Mhm.
I have conversations with them. I want to know what they're doing, and even on the flips.
Mhm.
And typically, I'm pretty conservative when it comes to stuff like that. Just because, especially in my local market, I know being two streets over is you're not going to get the same amount of money as you are two streets this way.
Mhm.
But I have those conversations with appraisers. You know what I mean? Like talk to them, find out why they do things, and if they can't find something, how far will they go at? What type of
Yeah.
community are they going to look at? Or you can't just throw a spec house up in an area that really doesn't have a lot of new construction.
Mhm.
It's going to be nearly impossible, to get a good value.
Value.
Um,
Mhm.
but typically I always try to, stay within 20% of the square footage. I try to have like for like bedroom, bathroom count, garage. I got a deal one time, I'll never forget this, from a wholesaler. And he called my partner and I, and he's like, "Yeah, I got this lot, and it's in a, like, near Innisbrook. I don't know if anybody golfs. And he was going on and on and on about what he thought we could build. And and I start looking at it, and I'm like, this is not on the golf course. you're,
Mhm.
you're looking at all brand new houses on the golf course. In this specific
Yeah.
area, you're talking $100,000 to $200,000 difference.
Yeah.
There's areas like, I'll give you an example in near South Tampa. There's a delineation of school districts, not that
And
wide of a.
you can see it straight down the line too. Yeah.
I mean, and we're talking $100,000 difference in
Yeah.
value versus one school versus the other.
Yeah.
And, they need to pay attention to those little things, in these areas, and really understand the market. And if you don't understand the market that well, make sure you talk to multiple people who probably understand that market. If you don't
Yeah.
have access to an agent, look at agents that are listing, stuff that might be flipped, or new construction, and ask them, what's your experience? Do you work with a lot of developers, investors? And then partner up with them in those areas as well. That value is so important to so many different things.
Mhm. I have a client that just bought. Oh, no, he hasn't closed yet. He's been trying to we've been, like, waiting. They're redoing a property line, so I'm waiting for an updated survey, but, um, disregard that part. But he's buying a single family in Naples for 1.4. The problem with the house, though, they just rehabbed it, but the problem is it's not big enough. It's, like, maybe 2,000 square feet. it needs to be 4,000 square feet, because at 4,000 square feet, it's worth like 5 million bucks.
Mm.
So he bought this property. The value is in the land. It's the land
Oh,
alone is worth 1.4. And the plan is he'll put a renter in there for probably maybe short term or midterm for 6 months to a year while he gets his permits. And then he will demo the house and build a 4,500 square feet house, and it'll be worth 5 million. So it's a great, you know, he'll
it's a
make, I
good
don't know. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's definitely a good plan to do that.
yeah.
I've had them where it might be a double lot,
Mhm.
and you've got to get the lot split,
Yep.
or townhomes or whatever it might be, and yeah, take advantage of that property that's there.
Yeah.
Get a renter in there. So I've had plenty of people do that. That is definitely a smart way of doing it.
Yeah, this guy, the neighbor, the seller is the neighbor, and the reason why I have this issue with the property line is he put his driveway too close to the property line, so they had to, like, redraw it, and we're in the process of that, but anyways, and I was also looking at a client had sent me one in Miami to do something very similar, and that area is real different because they have all these, like, little islands, right? And so it's like,
Mhm.
is it on the golf course? Is it on the water? Like, where is it? And then I was like looking, I'm like, because all of that matters. Like, it can
It does.
dramatically
It
affect
matters
the price.
what street you're on. I mean, there's just and again, right? It really varies. But if you can pay, like, if you really truly pay attention and you get on, and you don't again, right, you don't get have access, but I mean, there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
Some states don't show you what property sold for.
Texas,
Yep. So it's a little bit
real
harder.
difficult. Yeah.
But like Florida, I mean, I can probably tell you who their firstborn was very easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
The
uh,
one I was looking at in Florida, it was like you could get on, like, there was this one island, and I was like, "Who lives on this?" There's gotta be a guard gate here, and who lives here? Because the property values from this one little island to the next little island doubled. And so I'm like,
was it
"Who are
Star
your neighbors?" Right?
Yeah,
Like, what is that commodity of, like, who your neighbors are on Star Island or whatever those are called down there?
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't mind having my own island with nobody else on it
yeah, 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 for
though.
sure. All right, what else do we need to talk about as far as, our construction stuff here?
Let's see. I can tell you one thing I recommend. Um, there's two aspects, and not every municipality does this, but a lot of the times you can have a third, not just a project manager, but there's a companies that do the inspections for the permits.
Mhm,
um, and it's a third party. I always like to have a third party inspector come that is just double checking, your electrical before, and your plumbing and everything else, while the drywall's not up. Have a
mhm,
third party come in and say, hey, yes, this looks great. Because especially if you're hiring a contractor and you're not the contractor, and I can't tell you how many times I've had city and county people pass things, and
mhm,
then next thing you know, it's, oh, by the way, now you need to do this. Now you're tearing drywall down.
mhm, mhm.
So, again, it's an added cost. It's not that much in the grand scheme of things, but it's that extra security. So when
Mhm.
you're at certain phases, you have that completely different set of eyes, that, their paycheck isn't necessarily based on, covering stuff up.
Yeah,
You can have the best contractor and they have really good subs, and they just might have a bad seat at their company, or
mhm,
somebody that has a bad day and misses something.
yeah,
That's something that you can do, especially if you're starting out, right? You might not understand a lot of this.
yeah,
That's definitely something that I recommend doing.
okay. Let's go into, like, fees and cost, as far did we talk about that? Your extra fees and costs?
Yeah. I mean, there's financing fees,
Uh-huh,
there's origination fees, there's impact fees. And a lot of the times you can kind of estimate those, but I mean, there's places where you can pay $20,000-$30,000 in impact fees on one property. A lot of people forget to add that stuff in there. Um,
What's a going rate for loan, your origination fees between builder broker? Let's
um,
see if I'm in the
depending
pocket.
on the size of the deal, 8%. Just joking.
Well, let me see if I'm overcharging. I don't know.
I mean, anywhere from like 2 to 4%, on average. And it really just depends on, the structure of the deal and, your loan term and,
Yeah.
do you have extensions built in? And,
Yeah.
people forget to look at all of that. Sometimes, in a short-term lender like us, and most short-term lenders, I mean, they want to get in and they want to get out, right? I mean, they need to get their money in, get their money out, put it in something else. But sometimes you look at your loan structure. It might be better to do a 9-month loan, and if you've got a couple extensions built in, do the math, run the numbers,
Mhm.
see what makes sense. If you have to pay a 1.5% or a 2% extension fee, sometimes it might make sense to do that because your origination fee might be a little bit lower with 9-month versus a 12 or a 15-month.
Okay.
You just have to know and be sure that you're going to make those timelines. One of the other things, as far as monthly interest fees, um, I always give a buffer for build time. The contractor tells you, oh yeah, we can have it built in 6 months. Give yourself an extra 2 months
Yeah.
because there's going to be delays. I can tell you in Florida, forget it. Every time there's a bad rainstorm, a hurricane, I don't care if like you live in, North Florida to the, Georgia line and your property is all the way down south. Every single lender is going to want to send somebody out there to inspect the property to make sure nothing else is wrong, which affects your draw schedule.
Yeah.
You've got people in permitting and inspectors and everything else that run behind. And I'm sure you have it in other states. I'm sure you have it in California.
Mhm.
You've
Mhm.
got wildfires and everything. So
Yeah, yeah. The most wild one I have, like, I've client that builds in uh New York. And so depending on timing, it's like, do we start the project now or do we wait after it snows, right? Because you got like, I don't know, if
yeah,
there's a handful of months, you don't build. So I was talking with another client who was building close to him, and I was like, "So, what's your timing around, winter?" And he goes, "Oh no, winter's not my problem." He goes, "I had to clear trees off this property, and there is like a bat thing, like for bats." He goes, I only have this amount of time." Like, I have this amount of time to clear my land. He's like, that is the hardest part. He goes, because the rest of the year, I can't take any trees down because of this like indigenous bat.
this is not the first time I've actually heard of that.
I
Believe
was like, what?
bats.
Yeah, yeah, no, wild. I was like, it was the first time I heard of like bats. I was like, okay, weather, some interesting stuff, but not bats. Bats was an interesting one for me.
Yeah, gopher turtles, that's a big one
Oh,
here.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and especially, certain beaches and stuff like that. Now, you can pay to have them relocated,
yeah,
and there's preserves and stuff like that, but it costs money to do that, and people don't
yeah,
think of those things. That's why you've got to talk to your engineers, especially when you're in the permitting process. Spend the money on an attorney that's experienced in the area on rezoning, and and they're going to walk you through. They're going to know, right, in the area, what
yeah.
are the things that you have to look at. If you're in New York, you've got bats
Uh-huh.
to deal with.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, building over here, you've got you have some protected trees. We have in our area, there's a lot of oak trees that are protected. So and we have wetlands, so you've got a piece of property and you might have 3 acres, but you've got 2 acres of wetlands. You're not
Mhm.
building. you're not, I mean, you're just not. So, then you've got to get the environmental people out there. And so there's just a lot of things that go into it. It's not, especially on raw land like that.
Mhm.
When you're doing infill, which is, what you see a lot where you go into communities and they're demoing old houses that they're already there, and it's a little bit different, but
Mhm.
you need to make sure the utilities are in place. You need to make
Mhm.
sure, and a lot of times you have to get the utility companies out there and they have to disconnect and they charge you those fees. Not a lot, but they're
Mhm.
just added
Yeah.
fees.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. Let's see. What else do we have to talk about here? Let's see. What did Sasha say? The gopher turtle and the sand mouse give they get her every time. Yeah, depending on where you build, you're gonna have issues like that. All right, very cool. So if you guys are interested in ground up, go ahead and reach out to me directly via DM and we can go over specifics. And if we need Christine to jump on a call with us to walk us through some different financing options, please let me know. And where can people find you if they're interested, other brokers?
Um, they can find me on social media. They can call me directly on my cell phone. You can leave my cell phone down there if you want.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm always around, always happy to chat. My daughter says I'm always on the phone and always working. So hopefully she picks up that one day.
Same, 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 same. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll be back in, I don't know, a couple weeks. We're going to talk appraisals with Rob Roldan from Class Appraisal. So if you guys are interested, it could be really great if you're a real estate agent or if you are a mortgage originator, or even if you're an investor, this would be very important for you so that as you're uh, garnering your ARVs and what to do with your properties to get max value, you would find some value in this class. So I'll be back in like 2 weeks, and I hope you guys have a happy. What is this one? Is this Labor Day?
Yeah.
Happy. I always get Labor Day and Memorial Day, but Memorial Day is in May because they both start with M. So hope you guys have a happy Labor Day, and yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Thanks for having me.